Hello and welcome to this tutorial. This is the first part of work that I'm going to try and help you with on the psoas muscle and releasing tension through the lower back and the hips. So why have I chosen to do the psoas muscle? It's such an important muscle in our bodies. It is known as the emotional muscle because it is emotional memory muscle. It's where we store a lot of traumas in our lives in this muscle. Um, where do we find this muscle and how does this muscle work? It's very complex and I've been doing lots of work on it, and I don't want to do too much of the science bit with you. I just want to try and make it so that you understand how important it is. But how does it look? How does it seem? How does it feel? It is a really difficult one to describe, so I tried describing it to Dave like, do you know the old baby slings that they used to put on the, I don't know if they still use them, baby bouncers? And you put them in it and that goes around the hip area and hoists them up. That has to be flexible and it has to be able to move, and this is like this psoas muscle. It needs to have movement within it. So where is it? Where do you find this muscle? It's located down the central axle of the body, and it goes from the thoracic region right down to the lumbar region, so the upper part to the lower. The biggest job it does is stops you collapsing and falling over, in terms of it holds the upper body in place and the lower body in place. So think of it like an elastic band. It keeps your body up, but it's a vital muscle, and why it's known as the memory muscle is because it's often one that responds very quickly in terms of traumas, and we've all had a lot of trauma in our lives this last 12 months, so I kind of guarantee that most of you will have had some issues with this muscle which will have affected maybe other parts of your body. And I'm selfish in a way because I am doing this because I have been affected by this muscle, and my consultant, from a hip injury I've had over a year ago, my consultant has told me to really look into the psoas muscle and to try and heal my psoas muscle. So these next few weeks lessons are going to be about healing this muscle and about the impact it can have on your life. So why does it react to traumas? If Think of it this way, if somebody punched you in the gut, the first thing you would do is draw in to protect yourself. And that's what this muscle does. In times of trauma and times of stress, the muscle contracts and reacts and draws in. And then it begins to tighten, dries out, shortens, and that action has such an impact on lots of other parts of the body. Where it starts within our body, as in the thoracic region at the top in T12. So just to describe that to you, think of the solar plexus. Solar plexus 2 inches above the navel there. Go to the back of the body, that's where it attaches itself. And this, where it attaches itself here, it then has a triangle space, which is the other way up, sorry, which attaches your shoulders to it and the neck even to it. So this muscle is responsible for neck problems, shoulder problems, all sorts of issues physically, even knees, right the way down to knees. And what we need to do is work on keeping this muscle hydrated, soft, flexible, being able to maneuver and being able to lengthen. And it needs that. So it needs to first of all release, and it then needs to soften. So it's as thick as a hand, a fist. It's a big muscle. It's 16 inches long and even longer. It is split in 2 halves, and it comes down and it wraps in the 3 parts it has, the major, the minor and the iliacus. They split into 3 sections, but it splits in 2 through the body, and it wraps around the hips, and it goes further than this. It even then goes into the groin and even goes down towards the knees. And it's very complex, very difficult to explain all in detail, and this video is more about you trying to do some work, so I don't want to twerp on too much. I want to be able to get you into doing some of the work. But to do some of the work, it's so important because this muscle has a little shelf, a pelvic shelf, which organs sit and rest on as well. So it can have impact on your digestive system. It can have impact as high up as the lungs, right the way through to the gallbladder, the spleen, and the tense and shortening of it connects to the fact that it works with the neuromuscles in the brain. Because it's such a memory muscle and it's through a sacral area and also the solar plexus, it very much is the muscle that works and sends memories from the brain to the muscle. So it's a neuromuscle, and it's a difficult one to pinpoint exactly what causes it, but the thing is, you need to really connect to it in fine detail. So if this next few moments, well, it's going to be a good 20 minutes of exercises or more, you're going to need to try to stimulate the fluid within that muscle so that it can work with the tissues and it can really keep fluidity throughout the body, and it can try to release some of the tension and also helps with the normals with the brain. So this tightness, this curling up, this restricted, this traumatized muscle, and it doesn't need to be overstretched either. It needs to be released and gently treated. It needs to be kind of like us going back out of lockdown. It needs to be gently nurtured back into it. We've all got different bodies. We've all got different spines. It would be great if everybody was just exactly the same, but every spine's different. And what I suggest is that when you come to connect to the ground, you kind of really listen to your spine and listen to your body and listen to every muscle. And Dave will do some reading throughout this whilst I'm in the positions and trying to show you. They are somatic movements. We do not move at all, hardly. You are connecting to the muscle movement and that memory muscle movement while you're in a static position. So you're going to need two things for some of them: a ball if you've got one, a squidgy one. If you've not, I suggest you get hold of one, and that will come in a few moments. We're going to do two exercises first. You need a folded up blanket or towel, which is about 1 inch to 1.5 inches thick. That is just so that we can correct the spine from the cervical spine down into the thoracic. If you've got any issues with kyphosis of the spine, the curvature at the top of the spine, then you may need a thicker one, or you're going to have to really listen to what you need to get that nice spine. If you've got lordosis, which is a curvature, a tilt of the pelvis at the other side, on the base of the pelvis, you may need to put your legs upon a chair, and that will help ease. You'll only know this when you get to the ground and practice. So let's begin. And Dave's going to speak to you while I'm there for 10 minutes on the first one. I know you're thinking, 10 minutes? Stillness for 10 minutes? Wow, it's worse than yin yoga. So when we come down to the ground, this is where you're going to use the folded up blanket, and it comes just underneath the base of the crown, the base of the skull, sorry, not the crown, the base of the skull before it hits the neck. So all that's doing is stopping the chin tucking in and stopping it going up. So please try and just make sure you've got a neutral spine from the head there. And it's difficult, you've got to feel and sense throughout the shoulder blades and throughout the head. If you feel it's going too far up, take it away. If you feel you're dipping it down, put some more there so that you can get that line straight. Now, if you've not got a bad lordosis curvature so that you can tilt, you'll see it, there'll be a massive gap under here because your pelvis is tilting forwards. Now, if you find that, then I would suggest you put your feet up on a chair at 45 degrees there. Now, other than that, keep the feet on the ground. And this is so that you can really sense the connection to the ground as well. So you're going to have to really think about this now. This positioning is really key. The hips are the bony bit here at the front, and the feet need to be in line with those, and the knees need to be in line with those. So you don't need them out here because that won't work on this muscle. They need to be exactly in the space of your hip distance. So watch the feet, slide them along the mat and get them to the point where you know it's in line with your pelvic bone, with the hip bone. And the space between the foot and the bottom needs to be 45 degrees. Again, you'll notice the part where the hips now meet is the actual part for a hip joint is where you come to where the femur, the head of the femur, meets the bone. So find the base there. The top of it here is not your hip joint. This is your hip joint here. Feel into that and then bring your hands to that space there. Relax them down, the elbows. That is your psoas muscle wrapping around your hip flexors and your pelvic girdle. And that then goes round the back. This is the front psoas. The back psoas goes underneath and right the way up into T12. So now we're going to be here for 10 minutes. At this point now, from this point, I'll just tell you a little bit more, and then Dave, as he's measuring 10 minutes now, will read to you throughout this practice. And it really is about spending the time to truly connect in every detail to the movement of the muscles and to the brain and the mind. Now the eyes, don't stare up at the ceiling. Soften the eyes down a little, but don't tilt the chin. Ridiculous. Just soften them down. You can close them if you want to, but it's better to try to absorb everything around you a little bit and just come into this moment. And the key thing is to pay attention, to notice exactly where you're at with your pelvic region, with the muscles, the psoas muscles at the front here and the back. And I'm going to stay quiet now for the rest of this next 8 minutes while Dave just reads a little bit to you from the book on the psoas muscle.
As the psoas releases extra needed energy, the sensations experienced may cause feelings of vulnerability. If physical aches or emotional feelings arise from the condition's muscular patterns in the CPR, become quiet and simple. Follow the sensations throughout the body. Notice the stream of images, thoughts, and emotions that move through the body as the awareness of sensation increases. There is no need to change anything or to be absorbed by these associations. Instead, keep returning to the qualities of sensation coming from within the body, as well as sensations from outside the body, such as air currents, the warmth of sunlight, odours and sounds. Match the external impressions with the quality of sensations and feelings inside. Ideally, a balance will begin to occur between what is experienced internally and what is being received from external stimuli. By balancing the intensity of the internal world with the sensory impressions from the external world, there will be a moment where the two interface. This is the process of awakening. Being in the moment forges new nerve pathways and frees old conditioning to dissolve.
Try not to push the tailbone, lower back down to the ground. Just try and allow the muscles to relax slowly. A bit like the easing out of lockdown. Remember, this is the release phase. Now you can stay in this position for anything up to 20 minutes. And it is a difficult one to do because mind wants to tell you to go off and do things, to rush around. But if you really just slow it down and connect to that muscle and to that body and those sensations around you, and as Dave said, within you. So to come out of the position, we're going to slowly just begin to roll to the side. So whichever side's good for you, roll gently to that side. And then push yourself up slowly. And you would then start to walk around barefoot for at least 10 minutes and just observe how your hips and how your back and how your body feels. And it's just a mindful thing. You just really need to tune in somatically to each movement. But we're going to go on to the next exercise. Now I'm doing it on a mat, but when we come to do the next one, I'm going to move the mat up because you have to slide now the legs along the ground. And it's not good to do on a sticky mat because the feet won't slide. So again, it's exactly the same. And Dave said CPR is not, it's CRP, constructive rest position. So constructive means you're doing something good. So think of this 10 minutes you just did, and you only need to do the one exercise one day and this exercise the next. And what's 10 minutes out of your life if it transforms? This muscle, when it releases, when it softens, when it's back to its original state, can actually cause so many health benefits. It can gain so many health benefits, not cause. So let's come back again to that constructive rest position, and Dave's going to turn the page and read the next page, which is about extending the legs. And we're just going to again get back to that same position. So it will be exactly the same constructive rest position, and it's the page next to the one you just read. And we're going to slowly begin to try and release a bit more now. I'm just going to demonstrate, and then Dave will maybe read a little bit which might give a bit more definition. This actual bit now is really about trying to notice the front psoas, releasing the front psoas. And again, it's about connecting to that front psoas muscle. And you're going to keep the head in the same position, but you're gently going to slide the foot along. And as you do, you're going to really register that front hip flex, psoas muscle. You don't necessarily have to extend it all the way. And if you do, make sure you don't arch the back at all. And then you're going to slide it back very, very slowly and connect to the movement. Move the left and connect to that. Don't move the pelvic muscle, the pelvic bones at all. Just keep connected to moving only the muscles within those thighs and the psoas muscle particularly. So I'll just carry on sliding while Dave reads a little bit.
Begin in CRP to awaken the hip sockets and articulate movement of the leg from the core. With the pelvis centered, extend one leg at a time, sliding the foot along the floor. Place awareness and soften at the front of the hip sockets, and use a soften, move, pause rhythm, noticing when the leg moves freely without the pelvis. When this is done properly, there is no pulling in the low back. If the back arcs, begin again, putting more awareness towards softening the psoas as it passes over the front of the hip socket. Releasing the psoas allows the leg to move separately from the pelvis. The purpose of the exploration is not to extend the leg fully or to hold the pelvis from moving, but to mature the hip socket by learning to voluntarily soften the psoas.
And it is really tricky to do because you've really got to connect to it, because it's so tempting to arc the lower back. It's also so tempting to rock the pelvis side to side, and I can feel my left side snatching, and I know that I've got an imbalance in mine because of an injury on my right hip. It's tightened, and that's caused sciatica now in my left side. So this muscle, it really needs a lot of attention. So we're going to move now to the next phase. I'm going to stay down here because we're going to go to the next phase. Dave's going to turn the page over. And we're going to work now with the squidgy ball. It needs to be no more than a quarter of the way filled up, because if you fill it too much, you're going to really cause issues with the pelvis and lower back. We're going to try and locate the T12. So find your navel, find the space a few inches above it underneath the sternum, and then try and relate to that within that back space. This is difficult because I've got to try and get it in gracefully on video. Now, as you put it underneath, really make sure that you can feel it in that space of T12. That, remember, is that important solar plexus key area, and it's so important to release the psoas at this point, because this is where it's definitely got a hold of everybody right now. Everybody is in a place of feeling delicate, I think frightened even to sort of come back out. And this point here in the solar plexus where this muscle locates is about trying to give you confidence and courage and strength. So this exercise now is about, well, I'll let Dave really describe it to you. What I'll do is I'll show you what we're going to do. We're going to rock slowly without moving the knees other than hip distance. We're going to rock from side to side to move the psoas muscle, because psoas muscle likes the movement. So let's see if Dave can educate through Liz's book, because for me to remember all of this and to try and do it gracefully and show you, I think you can gain so much more if Dave reads beautifully from this book now.
After placing the inflated ball under the upper psoas, let the weight of the lower ribs rest on the ball. By giving up the weight, it's easy to gently rock from side to side. Let the rocking become a wave-like motion. Use a soft haw sound on the exhale breath. Now explore the area for 2 to 5 minutes and then move the ball down along the spine, stopping along the way to rest, and then repeat the wave-like motion until the ball is placed under the pelvis.
Now I would normally spend longer, but I'm just showing you. I have to move my feet in and my knees in a bit. So when you go further down into the pelvic area, make sure that you again get to the constructive rest position. And like it says, let the weight go onto it. If it's blown up too much, you'll find it difficult to control it. It's trying to get that pendulum movement, because this psoas muscle it needs to move side to side to get that softness back into the muscle. Are we there? Information loaded. So when you come to do this, as it says, spend 2 to 5 minutes moving it down the vertebra till you get to the pelvic region. And then obviously take the ball and again come down to that constructive rest period and place, and you'll notice, a softening immediately of that whole area. So we're going to come out of this now, gently rolling to the side, coming up. And this is just the first part. There's lots more to this. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope that you realise there's only 3 exercises there, each one 10 minutes or thereabouts. And again, you don't need to do them all in one day. It's entirely up to you. And just try and notice how you are with it. Give some feedback if you can, and let's continue the journey of healing this psoas muscle. Thank you everybody for taking the time to do this today. Namaste.